We move now to the deteriorating relations between the United States and Russia. Several hours of meeting in Moscow Wednesday between U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and his Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov seemed only to reinforce existing divisions between the two nations. Secretary Tillerson came away from that meeting at the Kremlin with a gloomy assessment moving forward.
The current state of U.S.-Russia relations is at a low point. There is a low level of trust between our two countries. The world's two foremost nuclear powers cannot have this kind of relationship.
So where do both countries go from here? Joining us now to talk about that, we welcome VOA Moscow correspondent Daniel Sheriff on Skype. Hello, Daniel. Along with VOA diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain right here in Washington. I thank you both for joining us. Daniel Sheriff, I'm going to start with you. You heard Secretary Tillerson. Does Moscow agree with his assessment?
Yeah, unfortunately, both sides were very clear that relations are not going so well, that they are more or less at a low point. And of course, we heard President Donald Trump say that, repeat that similar feeling as well. So unfortunately, we don't see things really going forward or going the direction that the Kremlin was hoping when it saw Donald Trump become elected. Of course, during his campaign, he had very positive things to say about trying to improve U.S.-Russia relations and about President Vladimir Putin in particular. This
is definitely not what they expected, correct, Daniel? They expected a more Russia-friendly candidate in Trump.
Very much so. They expected there to be a very big change in relations when they saw the comments that he was making during his campaign. And of course, they were hoping that at least some of those would come true after he took office. They were hoping particularly on the issue of Syria that we'd see some level of cooperation between Russia and the United States in fighting against Islamic State terrorists. But as we saw from the U.S. airstrike last week, and the quick deterioration, comments coming from both sides, very harsh words about wanting to see President Bashar al-Assad of Syria removed from power, wanting Russia's support in that regard, and Russia essentially responding, saying that it's up to the Syrian people, and that's their normal line, essentially, that they don't want to see a vacuum of power develop inside of Syria.
It's a big turn of events, Cindy. So how badly, I'm wondering from your point of view, has a missile strike, the U.S. missile strike at the Al-Sharat airfield in Syria, damaged relations between these two countries?
Well, I think it certainly has complicated matters. And some had thought that, because President Trump had been so complimentary of Russian President Putin, that there might possibly be some kind of big deal and that the U.S. might lift sanctions against Russia. None of that is happening, we're seeing now, especially after this airstrike. I mean, it seemed to me that the reaction from Moscow was certainly not pleased, but not really all-out red-hot alert anger. It was something in between. And I would say that this meeting also showed that both sides were saying we're trying to understand each other's positions. I think the Russians were trying to understand exactly what the U.S. position is now. Is it regime change? Right. Or is it just this was a strike, but not that much damage was actually done? So I think there's Russia's not used to the U.S. being the unpredictable one. Right.
And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that a bit later. But I want you to wear your political pundit's hat right now. There are some in the Democratic camp who see this strike as more as a cynical distraction to take away focus from the congressional Russia probe. What are they saying on Capitol Hill? What are you hearing from lawmakers?
Well, I am hearing some of that, and some of them saying that, it's not the first time that a U.S. president or other leaders around the world, when they are getting very unpopular at home and have all sorts of problems and issues, that they like to flex a little military muscle. Sure. Or, Trump was not able to get this big healthcare agenda done, which domestically was a big deal.
Because this has taken some of the focus away from the domestic politics.
That they turned overseas, and that wouldn't be the first president to do that.
No, you're absolutely right. And Daniel, so getting back to the issue at hand, Moscow obviously denouncing the missile strike. It's also demanding an international investigation. Is that a serious request? And what is Moscow trying to prove by demanding an investigation?
Well, what they're trying to say is that they feel that there are conclusions being made before there's been any real proof presented. We've seen a lot of the Russian state media not showing any of the videos or very little information about the civilian casualties that were reported very widely in Western media from the alleged chemical weapons attack from the Syrian government. So certainly they're wanting to see some independent people on the ground, at least that's what they're saying, to really look into what happened in terms of the gas that was released. From, as far as Russia's concerned, they're saying that it was chemical weapons stored by Syrian rebels and that it was accidentally released by a Syrian airstrike. So that's been their position. But of course, they haven't provided any real evidence of that either. So this call that we're seeing repeated over and over again for an independent investigation, whether or not the investigators can get there in time before, there's evidence, is either dissipated or disappeared, that's a big question.
And that seems to me like another distraction here, Cindy. But getting back into U.S. strategy, what is the ultimate strategy here on Syria? Has Secretary Tillerson expanded or explained what the U.S. strategy is regarding that region?
Well, we have heard different administration officials appear to contradict each other. Just a few days ago, Tillerson had said it would be up to the Syrian people to decide the fate of Assad, which is similar to what the Russians are saying. But then in recent days, when he went to Italy and when he went to Moscow, he was saying that the reign of the Assad family is coming to an end.
So is that the goal now, is to remove Assad from power?
Well, that's a very good question, Mill, and I'm not even sure if the administration knows. I mean, they've said things that sort of tamper that a little bit, saying, well, he should go, but it should be an orderly process. So Lavrov is now saying that that Tillerson agreed that there would be no more strikes, but I don't think Tillerson agreed anything of the kind.
Right. Daniel, same question. How loyal do you think Russia is when it comes to keeping Assad in power in Syria?
Well, certainly for the time being, they're not wanting to see Assad removed from power. They want a stable government in charge that they can do deals with in Damascus. They want to keep their military bases there. This is, Russia's big presence in the Middle East. Its big military presence in the Middle East. Their involvement in this conflict has also gotten the Kremlin back to the big table, involved in discussions in Geneva, in Astana, in Kazakhstan, able to talk to the U.S. again after such terrible relations over Russia's annexation of Crimea and its support for rebels in eastern Ukraine. So they certainly want to have at least somebody in charge in Damascus that they can deal with. Now, whether or not that's Assad is a big question. They've said from the very beginning that they are not, their support for Assad is not unlimited. But at the same time, they do want somebody who they can deal with. So it could be somebody from his family or a successor, but they want that to be a negotiated process that'll put somebody in power that they can certainly still have good relations with.
10 seconds, Cindy. Are we in the midst of a new Cold War?
I wouldn't put it quite that strongly.
Okay, but we shall see. Thank you for your reporting on this, Daniel and Cindy Sain. Time now for another quick break, but when we come back, humanitarian groups say time is running out as drought and conflict spreads famine and death in countries across parts of Africa.